Today's video may be a little bit longer, so I want to invite you to take a deep breath and settle in, because today's topic's important and kind of complicated. It's important that we be present for one another in the midst of these conversations. We often talk about being there for one another, and that can mean different things. Sometimes it's showing up for an event. Sometimes it's being available when someone calls or texts. Sometimes it means keeping a secret for someone else. Today, we get a story of Job and his friends showing up and just sitting in silence. Now, it's important to recognize that Job as a book isn't just one thing. It's really edited together pieces. It's a story that evolves over time with different authors from different generations. Some gets tacked on as it goes, as society comes up with new answers to this question of suffering, of struggle that Job's going through. Each friend kind of represents a different aspect, a different answer to those questions. But in the story we're reading today, in the portion we're looking at, Job is suffering and the friends are just showing up. They sit in silence with Job while he goes through all of his challenges. As he sits there in his hurt, they sit with him. As he's gone through some of his rituals of sackcloth and ashes, they do the same. They meet him where he is. Job's friends hear about his struggles, they come to see him, and they participate in the things that make Job feel comfortable. And still, no one talks. The friends just sit in solidarity with a friend who is deeply hurting. They have compassion. They also know him, his culture, his traditions. They meet him where he is. By participating, by being in solidarity with him, they do more for him than words could ever do. By being present, we can represent God's presence to others, with friends, with those in need. Once we open our mouths, that's when it gets complicated. We tend to find ourselves trying to represent, whether we're representing the friendship circle or the family or speaking on behalf of God. Our own feelings and worries, they come out. And often we can make things worse. We have to be careful with the words we share and decide sometimes if they're even needed. If we want an example of what our words can do that's wrong, just keep reading Job. The friends decide it's time to talk, and it's not pretty. It's actually pretty judgy and petty, and there's some really rough theology in there. It may even resemble some of the things we've said along the ways. Well, you probably deserved this. What did you do? Were you not humble enough? Were you not faithful enough? Did your family do something to upset God? All kinds of tendencies to blame, instead of being present with and letting God's presence be the power of the moment. We may feel like we're not doing a whole lot when we just sit with somebody and we're just present with them, but we're actually doing a lot. Our love and friendship can be a reminder of God's presence and remind people they're not alone. They're not the only one in this. When we were little, we got our first touch of a hormone called oxytocin. It's sometimes called the love hormone or the cuddle chemical. It's released when we are held by our earliest caregivers. Over the years, we experience it in different ways, but we might notice it as a sigh of relief when we feel seen or understood. We might experience it in romantic relationships or when we receive empathy. But we know that listening to each other, simply hearing their stories, allowing the uniqueness of their personal experience to come through, can create the same chemical, can have the same impact. But sometimes it's just so hard not to talk. We have our own feelings, we have our own stuff, we have our own need for someone to be in solidarity with us. When someone else shares, it reminds us of things we've struggled with. And all of a sudden, our stuff's on the table too. It's hard. We can also think someone's overreacting. Our culture does not have a lot of patience. Compassion fatigue sets in quickly. But God never tires. God's never done sitting with us and worrying with us. Christ can come through in our presence. For campers, sitting in silence may be new or physically difficult, maybe even nearly impossible. We're always multitasking. We're a multi-sensory society. It may be hard for you as well to set things aside and just be present. Now, this doesn't have to be a day of silence, but measure your words. Think about how you can be there for people and truly listen. Listening doesn't have to have a response. Body language says a lot. A couple simple words of affirmation can go a long way. Just a smile and a nod. Or, I hear you. Thanks for sharing. Simple things can go a long way to helping campers feel safe, feeling known, and to discover God in places, in ways, and in quiet that they may never have imagined.